Let's all join together and pray. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, for you are our rock, you are our Redeemer. Amen. What is your impression of God? Okay, that's a little bit too broad, right? So let's narrow it down a little bit better. How about this? How do you picture God's response to your prayers? Is it something like this, where God listens and God goes, what do you want? Or is God more thinking, hey, what do you want? There's a pretty big gap between those two thoughts, right? One of them, God is happy and glad and excited that you're praying. One of them makes you comfortable to ask and to pray for anything from God. And the other kind of feels like you're pushing it a little bit. That God does not want to hear. He does not want to provide, but maybe he will just because he has to do. There's a big difference between a lot of different ways how you think about God. Well, how do you view God's desire to care about you and your needs and provide for your life? Whatever somebody's view of God is, I promise you, it shows. You can think about these people in Acts that we were talking about, these people who were part of the very first Christian church. And it was cool because it was diverse. Like, there was a group of people that had been following Jesus for his ministry, the disciples who knew him, been with him for years, and they were committed and with him. But most of these people had just changed their lives completely, very recently, just to be a new part of this. They heard the apostles preaching, they believed, and they started centering their lives around Jesus. So with a lot of differences, you might expect disagreements and arguments and divisions between people who were committed and all in for a long time and people that were just pretty new coming in. But what they thought about God showed. How does Luke describe them? He says, all the believers, long time, new time, everybody there, all the believers were one in heart and mind. It's really cool because the Greek words here mean so much more than just like having a unified plan or idea. Their drive, their thinking, their hope, their goal, their identity was one in Jesus. Can you imagine what that kind of unity feels like in a group? Only something profoundly unique and special can make that kind of togetherness happen because we live in a divided and broken world. Now it's more than a few years back, but back when it was just me and Joanna, we loved driving down to where her family and her brothers lived to watch her brothers play high school sports. It was really cool. We got to know and be part of this group of people that would go and support and cheer and be there for the teams. But I think, if I remember right, it's her brother's junior year of football where they were actually pretty good and they got into the state playoffs. There was something really unique that stood out from the rest of the high school sports that we watched for them. They were part of the football team, and the team would have this box that every home game they would carry out. They would set it on the sidelines. It would be there for them to see, for the other team to see, for the people in the stands to see. And they wanted everybody to know. They wanted the reminder because inside that box, every player, every coach, they got to take something in their life that they loved, that was important, that was special to them. But during football season, something that had to be set aside, and they would put it in the box. So maybe it was the basketball because it was football season. Or maybe the video game controller because no time for video games, time for football. Or the book for coaches because no, it's time to focus on reading on how to help the team. And all of those things they took and put together and set in that box. And it brought a different level of unity for them. Every person was sacrificing something, and it was always right there for them to see the sacrifices that they were making. That brought them close together. By what these people were doing, these Christians, they were pointing people to the one thing that would bring them together. Do you remember the details? Did you hear these things? It's so easy, but these are crazy. God tells us no one in that group, no one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. Think about what are probably the two most valuable things we as people in America can own, right? Land and a house. And what did these Christians do? They sold them. They brought the money from the sales and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. I think I'm safe in guessing that people back then had the same reaction that you and I probably have when we hear about this. You wonder how they could do this and live. I mean, what does life look like when you give up things like that? I spent some time thinking about the practical side about this, but here's the bigger answer that I think God wants us to think through today. Here's the thing that we know about them. No needs go unmet, even when they gave up everything. No needs go unmet. That's the idea that these Christians wanted other people to see in them and through them. Connected to Jesus, no needs go unmet. Because this God who was joyfully meeting all their needs, he was showing himself through them. And really, this goes way deeper than the physical or daily needs of people. There was just one thing producing unity and that level of sacrifice. And God revealed it. He said, with great power, the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. Hearing the truth behind the rumors of this guy who claimed he would bring forgiveness for people, and that he had died and had come back to life, that God had changed these sinners into people who were forgiven, that was doing something. Now, with Jesus, their drive, their thinking, their hope, their goal, their identity, now in him, it was turning into one. It was all about what Jesus had done for them. It was all about their God who loved them enough to make sure that in Jesus, none of their needs would go unmet. Luke tells us, in other words, what this life looked like. Their lives were centered around grace, something that is free and undeserved. When you experience grace, it kind of changes who you are. The grace of Jesus was so powerfully at work in them that God met all their needs spiritually, when the truth is these people did not come close to deserving that. Then God used them to meet each other's earthly needs too. And you know what they thought of God's desire to care for them. You know what their opinion of God was when they asked for something. Their picture of God was a God of grace and love, who was going to provide them with everything that they needed, no matter what. But I think hearing about that level of unity and sacrifice and love for people, that does something else for you and me, though, doesn't it? You start to compare your life to theirs. Yeah, and you and I don't come close. Because you and I see the arguments and disunity and division. You remember the lack of care that you showed for somebody who just wanted a little bit of your help? You see the poor reflection and picture of God you've given to people without saying a word to them. How many times just in this last week could you go back and think through that you have failed to let people see the powerful grace of Jesus that really is for you and through you? I mean, just think through, what do you teach people about your God if you can't talk decently with somebody who has a different idea about morality and religion, but instead you always respond in anger? Instead of maybe graciously giving your best in whatever area of life that you need to give, your job, your family, your school, instead of giving your best, you just get away with the bare minimum that you can do? Are the spiritual needs of your coworkers and your family and your friends and neighbors something you purposely avoid talking about? Do you assume it's somebody else's job to help with the physical needs of people around us? I mean, all of this that is sadly part of our messed up lives, all of this kind of makes it look like God's grace isn't enough for us. You hear what these early Christians were like, and you can't help but be reminded of how much you and I need God's grace. And thank God, this is where the similarities begin between these people and us. These first Christians, they knew how much they needed God's grace, and they found out that connected to Jesus, no needs for grace go unmet. You know how much you need God, and how does God respond for you too? With even more grace and more gifts in Jesus. Easter is all about grace. The resurrection is God's finishing his story of grace and forgiveness for sinners like you and me. His grace is never stingy. His grace is never not enough. You and I sin and need help. And his grace meets your needs every single time. Because with Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus, no needs for grace will ever go unmet. And so because of Jesus, you don't have to dream about unity. You've got that right now. We, Christians, are united in our drive, in our thinking, in our hope, our goal, our identity. Christians are one in heart and mind. We are just like these people. We find out that with God in Jesus, no needs go unmet, and it's going to keep us together as one. Do you think you can recognize somebody from their nicknames? I think so. Thanks, Nora. I think with this one, I'm pretty sure you're going to be able to do it. Some of you a little bit earlier than others, but let's give it a try. Just give me a look or a little wave when you know who this is. All right? The big Aristotle. Big fella. Diesel. Superman. Oh, okay, Rain, you got it. Nobody else yet? All right, I'm going to make it a whole lot easier now. Everybody ready? Shack Daddy. Shaq Fu. All right, hopefully everybody's kind of nodding their head, right? Otherwise, I'm not sure if you've ever seen anything, social media or anything online or anything on TV, because who am I talking about? I'm talking about Shaq, right? This personality that is almost bigger than life can be. This guy who's gotten so many different nicknames, so many different parts of who he is, and each of these nicknames paints a picture about him and what he does and how he acts and how he lives. Yeah, you know about Shaq. Do you know that nicknames kind of happen in the Bible too? There was this hugely important guy in the New Testament who had a nickname. We found out his real name today. It was Joseph, the Levite from Cyprus. And he got a nickname that any of us would love to have, even better than any of Shaq's. The apostles called him Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. Isn't that the coolest thing? Right, when people saw him or heard him or got to know him, do you know what they saw? Encourager. There he is, the encourager. There he goes, the encourager. There he helps again, the encourager. It was a nickname that stuck so much that after this, that's the only name we know for him. This is Barnabas. This is who he is. This is what he does. Do you want to know a nickname that you and I could go by now? Try this one out. Son or daughter of a gracious and forgiving God. This is who you are. You are somebody that has all of your needs met by your God, who's always going to give you more than you ask, who has made you part of his own family, who wants people to see him through you. When people see you, they see a son or daughter of a gracious and forgiving God. So, if that's who you are, how are you going to show that in Jesus no needs go unmet? His grace is going to enable you to try to meet some needs too. You will not be selfish with grace. There's too much of it. So now how are you going to do it? How are you going to produce the fruit connected to the vine? Are you going to be the person that non-Christians can talk to, knowing that you are going to listen and react well and not judge them right away? Will you give the best of your time and your talents to serve in all the roles that God has given you in your work, your relationships, in your school? Will you look for opportunities to share God's love with somebody who desperately needs God's love? Will you reflect your God to the world by providing for people who need physical help? No needs go unmet, and through you, people are going to see the God that provides that. What's this picture of God that people are going to see? I don't think you're going to get the same level of exposure as these first Christians did, because God decided that these people were going to be part of the Bible. And that means for 2,000 years we've been reading about them and their sacrifice, and probably every time been amazed at what they did. But it's still going to happen through you. I know that through you, people are going to learn about your God. So let's do it. Let's let them see what it means to be connected to the vine. Let's let them see the fruit that God provides and makes. Show them who your God is, that in him no needs go unmet. Amen.